let me start the introductions. I will be brief in the interest of time, which means I won't do justice to the considerable expertise of our panel, but let me tell you, Calvin Nobles, you know, he has been introduced and introduced our esteemed president. So I will then move to Nikki Robinson, who's a security architect with IBM and an adjunct professor teaching, among other things, cybersecurity. Bruce Coffing is the currently security officer for the city of Chicago with a deep expertise in cybersecurity, including a stint with the Bank of America. Robert Wagner is a very experienced strategic advisor, advocate for cybersecurity. He's the founder of, the co-founder of Hack for Kids, which is a not-for-profit dedicated to educating children about internet safety and security, and has served for many years on the board of CISO Chicago, well, 10 plus years. So with that, what I propose to do is start off with a question, and then hopefully the panel will take it from there with some back and forth. So our first question we agreed on was, how has ransomware evolved, and how does detection prevention today differ from what just a few years ago? So Calvin, can we start with you?
Absolutely. I say one of the reasons it has evolved is how the number one target for most ransomware attacks are people, because we have invested so significantly in our technology and in our cybersecurity programs, but we still lag in addressing the human element. So that's enabling ransomware to target one of our most critical vulnerabilities in cybersecurity and make it so prevalent today. Is because it's really difficult in terms of how you address the human element in cybersecurity.
And Nikki, do you want to go? Let's go through the panel, and I'll ask you whether you want to react to each other.
Rebuttal.
Yeah. Rebuttal.
So ransomware, even just a few years ago, you know, it was sort of a one and done kind of a thing. But they're finding more and more when ransomware attacks are conducted, you know, ransomware attack conducted, whether they pay, probably, you know, they pay, okay, fine. They never actually get them fully kicked out of their systems. And so they'll just conduct the same ransomware attack again and probably ask for more money. So not only are they getting money the first time, but then if they're not actually kicked out, they're going to continue to make more money. So that's one of the ways that it's sort of changed. One of the other things is that they're also rebranding a lot of old ransomware. Revil and some of the other ones, they're just rebranding them. They're using the same sort of technology and type of attack methods, but they're just calling it something different now because they're still super difficult to detect. So they're doing less work and still conducting the same types of attacks.
And let's just go down the line.
Yeah, so I'd agree with that. And in fact, if you've been hit by ransomware and you're in manufacturing, or like we just saw earlier, any other place where intellectual property is pretty valuable to you, they're still stealing your intellectual property from you, right? Even if they're not doing the ransomware attack. So you've got to look out for that. And they've gotten so much better than we at developing. I mean, literally turning it into a CI/CD pipeline for ransomware, where you can buy modules you need as a service, and better project managers than I've seen in the corporate world at times. So that's a big part of the evolution as well.
Sure, and I'd add that they've gotten better at monetizing what they get, right? So they're going after the organization whose information that they've captured. They're going after them to get their address availability and get their systems back, but then they're also trying to extract or extort money to get the information back. But then they're also looking at the information that they got as well, right? So it may not be just the company that they attacked, but whose information did they have? Did they have third-party information? They go after those companies. Did they have individuals' information? They go after those individuals. So they're trying to monetize that information as much as possible, and it's not just where kind of, it seemed like, you know, a few years back, it was just, hey, we've got a target, we go after that company, and they try to extract money out of that company. But now it's second and third level beyond that that becomes much more insidious.
Anybody want to respond or react to any of the other panelists? Nope.
No, I agree.
Yes.
Violence
Very, very
and
simply.
Only in that whatever we just said, it's worse, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. Well, let's move on to our second question then, which is, how prevalent is ransomware as a service, and how easy is it for malicious actors to get and use a ransomware? Should we start at the other end?
Sure. I guess the most succinct way I could answer the second question is two. It's too easy, right? You know, as you were saying, the marketplaces that are available to get the ransomware as a service, the modules, and being able to easily and inexpensively get access to what used to be very complex attack tools is scary. And as a defender, with a very large organization to defend, you know, that's very concerning for me, because, you know, you're having to not necessarily just worry about very sophisticated threat actors. Now it's just anybody who has a stolen credit card that can go online and buy it.
Absolutely. And when you think about it, I mean, there is so much talent in other countries where we don't have extradition laws, right? Where the kids that are coming up through programming learn that they can make more money, right? And half the time they don't even know they're writing ransomware, right? It's gotten so compartmentalized that they're just asking people to write a bit of code. They make more money than they would have at any other job in their town or city. And so it's huge incentive for them. So they have armies of people to create, you know, the marketplace themselves, right? And there's people just developing that. So they've figured out how to make an economy out of this far faster than the U.S. can keep up with, for sure.
Yeah, I was going to add, you mentioned a little bit about project management and sort of how effectively and efficiently this is done. When you think about how we use SaaS now, we use SaaS all the time, right? It's easy to use, it's easy to consume. And it helps us in so many different ways. It's the same way that they're using ransomware as a service. They have pipelines. You can use it just like you would if you go select a SaaS product. Well, what do I actually need? Check the boxes and decide what you want. It's the same way for malicious actors. So now instead of them having to hire all of these developers or pay people to do this, they can just say, well, I want to target, you know, this healthcare, you know, organization. I want to target this local government or this particular business. I'm just going to go buy this ransomware and then just use it, because I don't have to, you know, do anything else, right? There's no harm, no foul. I buy it, it works, I get money, end of story. So it's I just wanted to really like emphasize how organized they are when it comes to ransomware as a service. And how difficult it is for products to still to detect it. There was a recent research paper where they were testing different ransomware samples, and they also developed their own, and they were able to evade like 7 different AV and EDR solutions. So it's still very, very easy to use and difficult to detect.
Wait, AV isn't helpful anymore?
Oh, that might be a different panel. Yeah.
And just a quick note on what Nikki, what Dr. Robinson was saying here, is that I think it's really mind-boggling that not only is we dealing with the ransomware as a service and the ransomware within itself, but we're also dealing now with fighting the support group that support those organizations, right? You can call them up for like customer support now. And so that's a real issue. So with them being able to engineer offenses faster than we can engineer defenses, it gives them a strategic advantage.
Could I ask a question that's not on the list?
Yeah,
Since
sure.
we're sitting in a law school, you don't have to, you can tell me pass, because I don't know the answer. But we're sitting in law school, so what should we, i.e. the legal community, do about what you just said?
Oh, actually, I have just one small note, because I've been asked this question before, specifically around terminology. What type of law, cyber law, policy, and terminology should we use to sort of how do we go after them? How do we fight this? And I would say that specifically the FBI has some really great resources because they've done a lot of research on ransomware, business email compromise, things like that. They do have some good, I think, terminology, at least some framing for it. But it is still incredibly difficult, like you were talking about extradition, and it's still incredibly difficult. But I would say the terminology and specifically calling it out is really important.
And to add to that, so I was actually very excited when I heard the dean had added cyber to the law curriculum, because quite honestly, most of the folks out there in the legal profession, especially our politicians who usually come from law degrees, are complete idiots. I mean, it's just so sad. I mean, what did they do
I'm
about...
glad you said it.
What did they do about ransomware? They started putting penalization against people who pay the ransom, right? And I realized that they're trying to do something, but I mean, it's so bad. 10 years ago, my wife was doing this thing with law firms. You've heard of standard patient, where someone pretends to be sick and the doctor tries to diagnose them, right? She was doing the same thing for lawyers. She was practicing, she would be someone that they'd have to give a deposition on or something. She calls me up and she's like, oh my God, they're doing a tech one today. What should I do? And I said, the first thing the lawyer's going to ask you is, how many kilobytes in a megabyte? And I said, and when that person does, say, well, do you mean like rounding to 1,000 or is it 1024? And sure enough, that was the first question the lawyer asked, and the lawyer was almost in tears when she responded, because they were like, I don't know what that means, right? So we got to teach our politicians to keep up with the pace that we're changing.
Yeah, and I'd add is, produce, kind of playing off of that a little bit, is produce more cyber-aware attorneys, because there is so much litigation in the space that we need the attorneys that understand cyber, that understand the nuances, the things that we need to build into contracts to make sure that we're addressing security, whether that's data security or system security, and making sure that you're producing more of those folks to get into the workforce and have that skill set available, because it's so rare at the moment.
Yeah. In fact, how are we the country that invented the internet and we have the least amount of privacy rights of any country in the freaking world, right? Why does the GDPR allow us to say, you have to erase my data now, it's me, and we can't do that here?
But well, you're looking at two of the people at the law school and IIT that are trying to do this. Yeah. Me and Calvin and Maurice, that's not that off with his kids. But yeah, exactly. I will just say one thing, then we'll go back to the schedule. Sure. We also, and Calvin knows as well, at the other side too, right? We are trying to educate the technological community about the public policy issues, so that we can actually begin to talk together. Right?
Yeah, I would add to that, as a security practitioner, I'm actually considering a degree in law, because I think it's so important that I understand that other side of it. Especially working for a large organization, I need to understand what are the implications specifically. If I'm working on a case or something like that, remediation, I need to understand what I'm talking about and what other people are talking about.
I could not. We could not agree. We could not agree more. We need to come together because we speak two different languages.
Yeah, we actually built our cybersecurity curriculum, the new cybersecurity curriculum, and then we realized we didn't have the law school. So we tore it apart, brought the law school in, and redesigned it with an emphasis specifically on law, because we knew it's a gap in not only academic but also in the practitioner side of the house as well.
Yeah, that's a really great program. But I could go. Let's go back to the, we should, right? But thank you. That really, I appreciate it. That's great. So, well, we actually covered, the third question I have on the list, we covered some, but let's look at it. In case there's one more, the question is this: what newer targets, threats are there centering around ransomware? And some of the earlier comments covered this. Anything more we should say?
Yeah, if I could expand on it a little bit. Everyone is a target. There is no distinction anymore. It used to be, somewhat targeted attacks with APT groups, advanced persistent threats, and they would use ransomware very specifically because at the time that ransomware started to evolve, it was very sophisticated. Now that it's easy to use and they know that it's highly effective, because we were talking about phishing in some of the earlier presentations too. Phishing is still a super easy attack to conduct. It works. So they use ransomware with phishing attacks to get the ransomware actually into the system. And so new targets is literally everyone. And I would say specifically with that threat in mind, the recovery and the resilience piece of that is becoming even more important, and where I think a lot of the focus is going, because detection still isn't quite there. So we got to focus on recovery. What does that look like?
And they're probably feeling worse on the recovery than they are on
Yeah.
the detection,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd add, kind of playing off the previous speaker is, I feel like the term critical infrastructure is way overused right now. I feel like every organization, somehow ties themselves, they're a part of critical infrastructure, but really it is looking at, disrupting the supply chain, impacting our ability to deliver services. So, from a municipal standpoint, water seems to be, the latest target of threat actors, and figuring out how to disrupt that supply chain and all the critical pieces that water plays in both, individuals' lives, but also corporate organizations being able to manufacture and execute. So, it's the evolving target there, and impacting the supply chain.
Yeah, and to that too, that's going to continue on for as long as they can continue making money, and that's their primary goal. What happens when that becomes not the primary goal? When the primary goal is to cause injury, to cause chaos and everything else. And I don't know any countries that would probably enjoy that at a certain point once they've stopped making enough money off of us.
Calvin, anything?
So when we talk about ransomware, I always think about it in terms of where can we interject? And like always, we're trying to get to the left of the boom, right, before it happens. And so I look at what initiatives or what capabilities we have, and I always go back to security awareness. So how can we enhance and reinforce security awareness to where it's more meaningful? Today, security awareness is not as effective as we can make it, because a lot of us use security awareness like mayonnaise. We just take it and we just spread it on the sandwich, and it's good enough for everybody. And it's not, because a lot of us don't eat mayonnaise. And so security awareness is the same way. We have to have it tailored. It has to be specific and intentional so that it really is more meaningful. And so to me, what I really would like to see is that security awareness able to keep up with the trend, with the techniques and tactics that we're seeing for ransomware and for phishing as well, right? Because they're using together. And so to me, that's where we have to start looking, because that's one of the few ways we can get to the left of it.
Ooh, can I want to add, I point to Dr. Nobles because we're human factors buddies. One of the things that we talk about a lot is how can we help our users, and specifically around phishing. And there's this shame component that comes with if you fail a phishing test. It's not a teaching moment. It's oh my gosh, I failed and I clicked on the thing and now I'm on a list and now someone's mad at me and my manager. And instead of it being a learning moment, a teaching moment, it becomes this shameful thing. And so we have to, I feel like, change the way that we do training to positively impact people and positively encourage people, instead of making them feel bad for clicking on something that, they got tricked into clicking on. So,
Absolutely.
in fact, one of the best ways I've seen around that, there's a hacker friend of mine who goes by the handle Ben10. It's Ben0XA because it's hex. Ben gamified security awareness in his company. He made it a competition. So he just basically announced, hey, you're going to see some things that maybe you might have learned about if you would actually watch the security awareness training. That is so horrible. We all hate it, right? We all hate that. It's so bad. But he, by midweek, he had people like trash talking each other. You're going down. I'm getting more points than you. People started reporting like the CFO for walking through the building without their badge on. But the best one happened like 5 minutes after the announcement. He gets a call from a very excited woman. She's like, hey, I found one of the things. And he's like, one of what things? And she's like, the things that you said that we're going to see. And he's like, we haven't started yet. What are you seeing? Oh, well, there's this thing that keeps popping up that asks for authorization. Just click here. They had a real incident within 5 minutes of gamifying their security. Yeah, it was amazing.
that's awesome.
The worst time in ever.
Yeah.
Anything else before we're going to move on to a closely related question?
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to read the question as written, but then Well, I'll tell you. So I'd like you to answer it twice. One for you people, who not to make you knowledgeable, and one for me and the business people that may not know quite as much as you do, right? So, but seriously, there are two audiences, right? One, you're talking to the expert audience. They need to know things in a language they understand. And then, as we were discussing before, there is a need to educate us, but you can't talk in the same way. At least, even I'm not like you, but even when I start my technical talk, they're gone.
Yeah.
Right. So, with all that, the question. What are the resources available for in-depth knowledge regarding ransomware, modern ransomware attacks? Right, with a double, shall we start, you can do it any way you want. We can start with the expertise question, whatever you like, but go ahead. Calvin, do you want to do first? Because we were at the other end of the table.
For me, I think, being a nerd and also being a researcher and being an academic, I like to read about things. And so I think the UK came out with one of the best reports dealing with the cyber threat environment. And in that report, it detailed in nature ransomware. And so to me, that is a resource that I like to use, that I like to read about, because they was able to capture a lot of data in that report. And to me, I took that same report and I teach it to my class when I teach my cyber threat environment class. And so to me, that's a resource because, again, ransomware is not totally used as a singular tool. It's used in conjunction with phishing. And so now you're able to overlay that and you get to see the real effect on a particular country. I think by reading about it and understanding it, it's great, but also when you talk about cybersecurity threat environment, you got to talk about how it pertains to you. And for me, on a personal level, I always talk about my mom. My mom is 72, and she's been on the internet all about 3 years now. And so we have rules around my mom. She got rules. One rule is she can't buy anything off the internet. So that's for me and my sister, we will buy it for her. She can't give away her credit card regardless who calls. And she's not allowed to give any of her personal data out regardless who calls. And the rule is if anybody called and wanted your information, direct them to me. And she gets 6 phone calls a week. I don't get any phone calls. And so to me, that's a way of preventing my mom from becoming a victim of an attack. And so the same thing on the internet, we make sure, she can only go to certain sites and I'd have to explain to my mom why we put these parameters on her. But last thing I want is my mom to get in a situation calling me in the middle of the day while I'm trying to give a lecture and my phone just keep going off. So we just built a box around my mom to help her be safe.
Yeah. If I could just interject before I go, now I will talk about your mom from now on. When I do this. But I would do it like when we're in elementary school, right? You learn how to safely cross the street, which none of us actually do what we're told, right? Look to the right, look to the left, look to the right again, go across the street. I think everybody admits the last step. But they taught us how to live safely in the traffic world and the world we're entering into, and we don't teach, right? We don't teach the rules of the road like you're trying to do to your mother, and we certainly should. But let's go right down there, Nikki.
Yeah, so completely, and I genuinely mean this unbiased, X-Force Red, they do have an annual report where they have really great metrics. There's also like the Verizon data breach report, like things like that. There are a lot of really great reports. The Ponemon Institute, they do a really good one. So there's a lot of really great annual reports that come out with some great metrics to sort of help, especially from the technical side when you're trying to help people understand how serious these threats are. Using statistics and helping people understand that, phishing attacks are still like 90% of why compromises still happen. So statistics like that are super helpful. For a non-technical audience, CISA has actually put out, DHS CISA, they have put out some really incredible resources for technical and non-technical people. They have their Shields Up campaign going right now. They have so many free tools available. They're easy to use, easy to consume. So they're a great resource. They're someone I go to all the time, especially for updated guidance and things like that. But they're very, very good at information sharing. And they've gotten a lot better about partnering with, FBI, DHS, and DOD. They put out a lot of joint advisories now that give out, for the technical audience, they give out, file hashes and things like that you should be searching for in your environment, but they also give the non-technical, hey, you need to be aware if you see an email with the subject line X or an Excel file that tries to download that looks like this, it really helps to sort of give people context. So those are some of the things I use, yeah.
Absolutely. So, and multiple government agencies, right? CISA is certainly one of the best ones. NIST, who we saw earlier. Hopefully everybody here knows the government ones, because the list could keep going on here. Some other ones you may not know of. So there's the DFI report, who just dropped a report about quantum ransomware, which isn't like quantum computing. It's not using quantum computing to do stuff yet, thank God. But that ransomware went from initial compromise to complete domain encryption in 4 hours. All right, 4 freaking hours. So learning how that's working, getting the MISP project is an open source intelligence project. So if you're sitting there going, I'm too small of a company, I can't buy threat intelligence. We've got open source threat intelligence out there. Most folks know about Styx and Taxi. Corporations are even starting to do good intelligence sharing. So, I used to work for Splunk, and Splunk actually has created some stuff to allow people to share that way as well. And then, again, for the small organizations, governments, small local governments, fusion centers can be really good. The Pac-10 has a fusion center. Multiple governments across the U.S. have fusion centers where no single entity can afford a security center by themselves, but they all get together and work together. Sometimes they really suck because there's too much infighting, but when done well, those can be super helpful.
Yeah. And I'd just like to echo the point made about CISA. Director Easterly, since she's taken over, has really made it a point to do a much better job at communicating the resources that they're creating, and thus the Shields Up moniker and site and collection of information. So highly recommend that. And then there's a local organization here in Chicago, Chicago First, that their tagline is, a crisis is no time to exchange business cards. So it's making sure that you've met your local CISA representative, making sure that you know who your local FBI representatives are, have that relationship there, have their phone numbers, have met them, and be in a position where you're comfortable picking up the phone and saying, hey, yeah, something's going on, I need help. And they're there to provide that assistance. So making sure that you're building those relationships.
Two quick other plugs. So there's a new conference in Chicago called Blue Team Con. It is all about defense. There's tons of great information that came out. Last year was their first year. We're going to have another one later this year. And also, so we started Hack for Kids to teach kids about STEM things, internet safety, security, and ethics. I think there needs to be one for seniors too. I really think that they need some resources so that you can protect your mom, right?
Exactly, yep.
That's great, thanks. Can I just, one quick follow-up? Well, one of the ambitions Calvin and I have is to teach some substantive law to the technology group and some substantive technology to the lawyers. So, for example, I teach a coding and Python course to the lawyers.
Wow.
They're not, well, it's pretty basic.
Still, but
the idea is the idea is not that they'll write code, but but it does something about changing your mind, right? So that that's how those guys think, right? Right.
Yeah, that's great.
And we want to do the same for lawyers. So this is probably too amorphous a question. That's my question. Do you see possibilities along those lines? Because we need to work together to do this. And so the goal is to go beyond the reports and actually, I now know a little bit about how data science works, right? More than the popular stuff. I know a little bit about how the code actually works, right? For the same, when I was a philosophy professor, everybody had to take logic. Not so that you'd become a logician, so you'd know what it can and can't do. Right? Is that an ambition that you would pursue?
Yeah, so I actually got my undergrad in software engineering. I thought I was going to be a developer, and that knowledge has carried me through, into security. I did IT operations for a while too. So understanding the other side of the table, whoever might be on the other side of the table, it only helps, especially with communication. Like we were talking about, we use a lot of different terminology, which is where my human factors research has totally gone now, is trying to understand how we use terminology and communicate with each other, because that seems to be really challenging sometimes. So yes, so I think that is a completely essential component. And I know I would love to speak to more lawyers and get a better idea of, what do you see in your cases all the time? What is the, what are the problem sets? Yeah.
We're good at telling you what's in the cases.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? I'll go, and we're just about right on time. This is our final question. We've touched on several times. How do we share ransomware intelligence? And, well, how do we, and I suppose we added, how should we? Anybody, we were going up and down the panel. Anybody want to volunteer to go first?
It's so hard because there's still too much old school thinking. If I share, then people are going to know I've been breached. Yeah. And let's face it, our keynote speaker said there's two kinds of companies, ones that have been breached and ones that will. I say there's three. There's ones that already have and know it. There's ones that have and don't know it. And the third one is the folks that will never know it. But you've been breached, absolutely. And so let's just get over that. We have to figure out a way. I think, again, if the government can lead the direction, that's probably going to be the easiest because that kind of takes away the... People always think they know how to do it better, right? So a lot of times when fusion centers fail, it's because one person who's a lead doesn't agree with the way another person is trying to do this. So government leading it and somehow monetizing it, I think, could lead to an effective way to get sharing to be effective.
Oh, we can monetize it by finding you.
That's true, yeah. I'd rather monetize them in an encouraging way, though, right?
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, just to play off of what you're just saying, is that we're starting to see more government requirements, right? Mm-hmm. So the SEC is in the process of coming out with additional guidance that are going to require public companies to report. You've got different regulations, whether that be in the aviation space, where you've got, again, requirements coming from the government to report within a particular time frame. So we're starting to see more of that, so I think we're going to get better at it. But I think to your point, the stigma, and then to take the negative side on the attorneys, but it's the risk that the organizations face of lawsuits if they are communicating about ransomware or other cyber event information publicly.
You made me think the exact thing. Yeah. Half the time large corporations don't share is because their lawyer said you can't.
Yeah, we tell you. So what one solution would be legislation to, as effectively as reasonable as possible, anonymize the information.
Right.
And penalize disclosure.
Yeah, I'll put my human factors hat on here for a moment. I think we can take a page out of the aviation book, and that is when there's a defect or maintenance issues going on with a 737, and an airline discovers that. They put that information out across the board to everybody. We can do the same thing in industry. Yep. If we just, you don't have to say who's reporting it, who was hacked or whatever, just report the incident and report the findings behind it and get the information out there. And that way you're appeasing the lawyers, you're appeasing your reputation, and you're also informing the community.
So just for the audience and for me, if you ask the lawyer public policy people why we should share information, our answer is, well, the attack patterns tend to be global, right? And the perspective of any one network is local, and you need to detect that. You need a lot of information to detect the attack patterns. That's why it's hopeless if we don't share information. Right. Right?
Yeah, it's very difficult as a practitioner and a network defender to defend the network if I don't know. So so I know I'm big on information sharing. It's why I like doing public speaking and coming on doing panels, because I think the more we talk about this and remove the stigma, encourage people to share information, the better it's going to be for everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, if we are sort of back on time, which means we actually have time. Well, first, anybody from the panel, any final comments, thoughts, further questions?
Something so you had asked how we explain this to the business, and
Yeah,
a thought occurred to me as we
exactly,
were
yeah.
talking. So there's been a couple. Is Arlen in the audience yet? No. Yeah. Okay. So he's coming up with some really good stuff that I think we should pay attention to. But measuring risk in a way that the board understands has been so difficult. We suck at explaining risk in those terms. So Arlen's got some good stuff. I'd also recommend taking a look at Douglas Hubbard, How to Measure Anything in Cybersecurity Risk. He literally has a free spreadsheet out there for you to take your risk and put it in dollars that the board can understand. And it's pretty amazing. So take a look at those resources. Thank you for being here, Arlen. It's so important. We have to explain the risk of malware, not in ways that they can understand, but then measure the solutions in ways that monetarily will reduce the risk for the board in the most effective way. And that's not easy to do.
Yeah, and it's somewhere where we need to educate lawyers, because our required by advocacy response is to help you avoid liability, right? And so, as you noted, that may in the current situation, don't talk about this. First thing we tell you, keep your mouth shut.
Right.
Right. So there's a change on the business side, and there has to be a change in the mindset of what it means to represent adequately, right?
A lawyer's first answer to anything is no, right? And then I'll think about it.
Remember, nobody remembers Lost in Space, at least among my students, but we're like the robot in Lost in Space, right? Danger, Will Robinson, danger, Will Robinson. That's our job, right?
Yep.
And our job has to change beyond danger to this is how you ought to proceed in light of legal liability, but also the requirements of public policy.
Right.
And that is not understandably how we've been trained.
Yeah.
Anything?
No.
So anything questions from the audience? We got all, yeah, well, like I said last week, my students too, I told them last class, any questions? Nope, good. Yes, sir.
Real quick, Bruce, you mentioned more cybersecurity requirements that are coming out of the government. Could you share a little bit more about where they're focused? What you're seeing with like power and light or aviation?
Sure. So I guess the reference that I was making there was TSA came out with the regulation recently where airports are required to have certain security personnel in place, identifying a CISO and having that person be on point for not the operations side of the field, right? So airfield operations, that's the responsibility of the federal government. But everything else, ground operations, everything else involved with running an airport. So having that designated, and then there's a list of requirements that comes along with that in terms of security requirements in place, audit requirements in place, et cetera. So that was what I had in mind with that, but also top of mind right now is water management. So Chicago has the largest water filtration plant in the world, Jardine, the thing that sticks out right next to Navy Pier. So at least for the time being before Houston brings theirs online. But water management seems to be a big target of late. So, and I think it's twofold. One, because it is such a disruptor to being able to, again, using the overused phrase critical infrastructure, but also from the standpoint that it is kind of a soft space right now, right? You see Olmsted, Florida, a year or two back, and other water facilities around the country that because, they've exposed themselves to be able to manage their facilities remotely and have not, in many cases, have not done a good job to secure that remote management, that it's that soft underbelly that's being identified and attacked. So, it's twofold there. So we just need to focus on that and make sure that we're applying, best practices there to reduce risk to that critical piece of both life to individuals, but also to corporations in how they manufacture and execute.
And anything else? Our time, you're not telling me to stop, you actually have your question.
So it's related to, I think Nikki rightly was mentioning GDPR. So how does Europe's general data protection regulation, how would that affect American corporations that aren't under that regulation?
Oh, well, so that affects anybody that's doing business with those, right? So.
If I could say rather, if we had a similar regulation here, how would that benefit?
How would it benefit well, I don't know how it would benefit business. It would certainly benefit us, because I've considered getting a residency in the EU just so I can legally say you have to delete all my data. How would it affect us here? At the very least, it would put more government control over what people are allowed to do with our data and give us more control over it. And I'd really like to see that from a privacy standpoint. It certainly is not going to help with ransomware at all, but I think it's important. A lot of companies will lose money, right? I mean, being able to collect that data is what every information broker leverages right now, right? We are a product, pure and simple. I'd love to see some students start creating AI that's meant to protect me from bots on Twitter, from influencing seniors who have no idea that they're interacting with a non-person, all sorts of stuff like that. And the only way that's going to happen is if we get control over our privacy.
Yeah, we can do those. We can do that AI as long as we can monetize it by collecting your data.
Right, exactly, yeah.
One more. And then
I was
we
just going to add to that. I think the thing that would help with a similar GDPR act in the U.S. is consistency across the board, right? You've got 50 different states going out and trying to create their own privacy statutes. And from a corporation standpoint, having to comply with 50 different sets of regulation is very challenging. So if we could get some consistency across the board at the federal level, that would certainly help corporations so that they have one target to shoot at.
And it needs to happen now. In the EU, already open banking is there.
Yeah.
Open banking is going to happen here, as well as open patient information. So if anybody can buy your patient information plus your information on how you drive your car, because you're Googling your way to your destination and all sorts of stuff like that, I see so much potential for people to start using that information against us, right? In ways that you wouldn't even notice.
We better, do we have time for one more?
Nikki had one more thing to say about that, though. You kind of jumped up about the GDPR thing, right?
We should probably,
I don't know if he had a,
what, yes?
oh, no, I'm good.
We should probably, this was a great discussion. It shows we need another conference on privacy and data collection. Would be great. Well, we should draw this to a close by thanking our excellent panel.